so much for joining my presentation. My name is Raphael. Excellent pronunciation. I am based at University College London in the United Kingdom. And what I do is really experiments that can help the inkjet sector. So I am interested in anything connected with inkjet printing, not only drop-on-demand, continuous inkjet, but possibly other, like the archipelago technology. So we are interested in anything from the jetting, aerodynamic effects, the breakup of the filament, but also the landing. So whether the landing spreads very nicely or it splashes. I'm going to be very honest because I took a couple of slices from my teaching, from my lectures, and we are covering something called dimensionless analysis. So you probably remember this from your engineering or science degrees. So what we do is that we take a look at all the parameters that are playing a role in your system. So that can be an inkjet system. So for example, viscosity, surface tension, density, the speed of the ink, the speed of the droplet, and then the size of the nozzle, for example. So once you have identified those parameters, then you can play and construct something called dimensionless parameters. So now I'm going to tell you a story. This is a very simple one. So when I was about 5, I got my first Millennium Falcon. And to be very honest, I got very disappointed because I could see that there was something wrong with my toy, because in the movie, I could see people, interacting, playing, running, having lots of fun within the Millennium Falcon. But in my toy, the figurines didn't have any space at all to do things in the ship. And it took me about 20 years to realize that the scaling was not done correctly. So if you were to define the length of the Millennium Falcon, and then you'll measure the length of the Stormtrooper, then you define at the first dimensionless parameter, which is just the scaling. So if you divide the length divided by the length of the height of the Stormtrooper, then you have a number. If you do the same exercise with the real Millennium Falcon, not that it exists, you get a different number. So that really means that the scaling was done incorrectly. So now, surprisingly, this is dimensionless, so you have meters divided by meters, so you suddenly build up a parametric scale that is dimensionless. So this is exactly what you can do in fluid mechanics, because fluid mechanics is actually scalable. So that allows to test big planes in a wind tunnel, that allows to test Formula 1 cars and cars in the small scale, because the physics scale up and scale down. And in inkjet printing, that's very useful because we can do experiments across scales. So we can have experiments with 20 micron droplets or 2 millimeter size droplets or something in between. And as long as you keep the physics correctly, then what you find in one scale goes across other scales. The first thing is that you need to identify the most useful parameters, or the parameters that play a role in your system. And once you identify those, there are various methods. You can do empiric, try and error. You can do something called Buckingham Pi theory, or you can use like proper theoretical physics to find out those dimensionless numbers. These are the three we mostly use in inkjet printing. I'm pretty sure your CTOs knows this very well. So the Reynolds number, the Weber number, and the Ognesorge number. So they include things like the nozzle size, the speed of the droplet, viscosity, surface tension, and viscosity. I probably repeat one of those, but anyway, so we have 5 variables. And each ink will have 5 variables or more. But a couple of decades ago, Brian Darby, this is a professor in Manchester, came up with this parametric scale. So you have the Reynolds number on one axis and then the Weber number on the other axis. And then he found this sweet spot for printing. So this is for the production of a nice single droplet without any satellite that can make inkjet very easy. And as long as you are in that region called printable fluids, then your inkjet would work for drop-on-demand or for continuous inkjet. Otherwise, you will not have enough power in your heaters or in your piezoelectric elements to produce the jetting, or maybe the droplet is too fast and produces a splashing. You might not see it, but then you see misting because you have small droplets coming up out of the spreading, or you simply don't have enough energy to overcome surface tension. Anyway, so a lot of people use this parametric scale to check or to guide you through formulation, But of course, then we have a couple of questions. So fair enough, you need to find the viscosity. How do you find the viscosity? We have various methods. We have the PIV, piezoaxial vibrator. A regular attendee of this meeting is 3Jet. So they sell the fastest technology available to get the shear rate versus the viscosity for inks. And I note, please, that you can only go to about 2,000 seconds to the power of -1. So about 2 kilohertz. If you use a conventional rheometer, you can only go to about 1,000 hertz. So 1,000 or seconds to the -1. And of course, you can have a very nicely behaved ink, which keeps the viscosity constant, but you might have an ink that is shear thinning or shear thickening or something much more complex. So when going back to this parametric scale, which viscosity do you use? So do you have it at here? Do you have it here? Do you have it here? So well, we can do this very quick exercise. This is a inkjet printer or printhead from SAR. These are very traditional numbers, so 50 micron nozzles, printing at 5 meters per second. You know, now we know we'll probably go much faster than 5 meters per second. But then the calculated shear rate is 100,000 hertz. So there is no rheometer technology, there is no shear technology that can give us the viscosity at these shear rates. So we are still decades far from understanding inks. So this is the stuff we kind of do in the lab. The same applies to, okay, that didn't go well. Surface tension. So Evonik presented, is present here. This is the surfactant by Evonik. So Surfino, fair enough, is the fastest surfactant available in the market, or one of the fastest. But you know, if you were to use Triton or SDS, you actually need to wait 20 seconds. 20 seconds, imagine that in the time scale of inkjet printing. 20 seconds for the surface tension to change due to the surfactant. But if you use Surfino or BYK, so you know, you see an effect in 1 millisecond. But is 1 millisecond good? Well, clearly not, because if we look at the scales of inkjet printing, so from jetting to the breakup from the nozzle, we only have 40 microseconds. And again, so this is the stuff we do in the lab, so there is no technology capable of giving us the surface tension at such timescales. Other kind of experiments we do, so we're trying to increase the compatibility of inks. So for example, particle loading, not only the effect of surfactants, but also the effect of the substrate, so papers, coatings, and so on the spreading. So this is the kind of experiments we can build for companies. So this is a project with SAR, and don't worry, this is public. I can give you a copy of the paper. So we have one of the fastest high-speed cameras available in Europe. So it's a TMX. You don't really need to know the details, but we can record all the way to 1 million frames per second. And you have the printhead on the upper left side. We have the recirculator at the bottom. And this is the kind of videos we can take. So 1 million frames per second. This is not a strobing. So this is the actual jetting from a SAR printhead. And the one at the top is unloaded. The one at the bottom is loaded. 15% volume fraction of titanium dioxide nanoparticles. And we were trying to see the differences between having the nanoparticles there or not having the nanoparticles there. And this is what you have. So fair enough, we are matching the dimensionless numbers. So you know, maybe the viscosity is not exactly the same, but at least in terms of the scaling, they are the same. With the advantage of now, by having the particles, we can affect the behavior of the satellite droplet. So if you have no loading, the filament breaks off into a satellite droplet. If once you have the loading, plus the benefits of having a loading, now you can get rid of the satellite. And this is only observed by high-speed imaging. If you go back to the scaling parameter scale, so this is something that it looks like. So you have the unloaded liquid and the loaded liquid, both of them living in the printability range. Other stuff that we do is understanding droplets on fabric. So this is a collaboration with DSTL and the Ministry of Defense in the UK. So this is the Defense Science and Technology Lab. And they are trying to understand whether the droplet penetrates or is captured by the fabric or passes through the fabric. Of course, for application in the military, so trying to avoid biological or chemical weapons from passing through uniforms. This is the kind of videos we can use. So this is a droplet impacting on a fabric, and whether the velocity or the liquid properties are right, you can have either capture or penetration. And you can, of course, treat the fabric in different ways, make it hydrophobic, superhydrophobic, hydrophilic, and so on. And of course, we have the modeling, but again, we put everything in terms of scaling. Scaling is important because we can relate these, not necessarily in the same scales or either length or time scales with inkjet applications. We're also very interested in the landing. So that, the upper video is great. You have a very nice spreading, which you can form very round droplets. That's very good for the coding. But of course, if something is wrong about the ink or the substrate, you can have a splashing. I know that some of you might say, well, wait, in inkjet we don't have a splashing. I have to say that because the droplet fragments into smaller droplets that are about 100 times smaller than the droplet, if you have a 50-micron droplet, if that thing is splashing, you are not going to see the droplets because they are below the 500 micron, which is the diffraction limit. So, maybe the reason you see misting in your applications is because, well, maybe you are actually producing splashing. We also study aerodynamic effects. So there is a spectral printhead printing at 6 kilohertz, 0.5 meters per second. The paper is shooting off, and the gap between the printhead and the substrate is about 7 millimeters. And of course, you see the application. So not only printing on flat surfaces, you are trying to increase the gap. But of course, if the gap is too high, aerodynamic effects just drag the droplet, and you never see anything landing on the paper or the substrate. It can be cardboard or with the roughness of the substrate also affecting aerodynamic effects. We can also see this through lasers. So this is a SAR 1002 single row printing. Now the laser is making the satellites shine. And if you turn the 2 rows, then you see that a lot of the satellites stay in the atmosphere as mist. So if you're interested in any of these, of course, we change the gap, we change the speed of the paper, we change the paper or the substrate. So this is the stuff we do in the lab all the time. And finally, CIJ, we're also interested in continuous inkjet for labeling applications. They are much faster than drop on demand, about 20 meters per second, 20 or more, 80 kilohertz. By the way, a lot of my collaborations are Domino, AFCA, Archipelago, of course. This is in collaboration with Domino. So we're also very interested in making sure that this filament doesn't break up into too many satellites, because then it gets kind of difficult to control, and also misting within the printhead. So we're very interested in finding whether that filament breaks up into a single droplet or multiple droplets. Again, high-speed imaging. Under those conditions, the droplet, or the filament, breaks off into many droplets. That coalesces into a single droplet. And of course, this is favored by industry. Well, some other examples. And again, going back to a parametric scale, when you have dimensionless numbers in both axes, so you can take your ink, you know the Ogden-Sorge number because you know the surface tension, the density, the viscosity, and the sizes. And then you can find at what point above this curve, everything breaks off into multiple droplets. Anything below coalesces into a single droplet. So this can be used for tuning your waveform or the liquid properties. Finally, we're also very interested in splashing, as I just say. So we not only look at the liquid properties, but also at the substrate properties. We can calculate the dynamic contact angle at about 1 million frames per second, so at about every microsecond, we can adjust the dynamic contact angle. And that depends on the roughness, the chemistry, the surface energy, and of course, the liquid properties. If you have any interest, so my name is Rafael, and UCL, please have a chat with me. Very happy to collaborate and extend my network. That's my email, and thank you very much for your time. And thank you to the organizers.